Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I don't know if they can hear us yet. Can you hear us?
Yes.
In 30 seconds, we'll find out if you can hear us.
No, you're good. They all said
hearing
hi
you
already. Yes, you're live.
All right. So we have a monitor for the first time over here so we can actually see ourselves. So if we constantly seem like we're talking to nothing, you guys will know. Nah, let's not.
Don't
poke,
Inception.
don't poke the bear,
Yeah.
John. Don't poke the bear. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to Crowfall well, it is live, but it's a mini.
Yeah.
Mini Crowfall Live.
Ace Q&A.
Ace Q&A. And I'm J. Todd Coleman, creative director, and I have with me
Eric Doggett, senior animator.
fan favorite Eric Doggett. We decided that you guys would prefer Doggett over Blair this time. I stand by that. I think that's absolutely true.
That's what they want.
And John O'Neill wasn't available.
He wasn't. He's too busy working.
All right, so we have a handful of things to talk about today. Oh, that got smaller. Oh, it's an ad. So we've also got the over here on the right, on my right, is we probably should have flipped it so it would actually look like I was looking at the chat when I'm looking at the chat, but I'm not. It's gonna bug me all morning.
Flip it.
I don't think you
everything
can
would be
flip it.
backwards.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
All right, so we are going to talk about a handful of things today. Val asked me, so what are you officially going to talk about? What do I call this thing? And I just threw some stuff out. We're going to talk about, the actual things that are the title of this, which was like projectiles and power trays. That'll take like 5 minutes or something. Like, we're going to talk about basically what we always do, which is just we'll field questions and we'll talk about whatever we're talking about.
Yeah.
So you want to just start with what's going on in the company right now? All the crazy stuff we have cooking?
Let's do it.
All right. So we have Gamescom coming next week. Mm-hmm. So that's taking a fair chunk of our time.
Yeah.
We are making changes to the test. We finally get the test environment up and running, which is really cool. We've been talking about that for like months, right?
Yeah.
So we have a full separate testing universe now that players can log into. We still have the live universe. Right now, live is really not our focus. We've been focusing on test. At some point, test will hit a quality level where it seems stable enough that we can remove that version over to live. Mm-hmm. And then you'll see now the latest and greatest and sadly buggier version will hit test. And so that'll be basically our pattern going forward. It took us a while to get there. So that's finally done. We are rapidly approaching, I would say now, the point where we can actually run a real campaign. It's starting to, the people who are in playing on the weekends, it's starting to feel like it's almost there. In fact, last weekend I had Bentley disable the world map because I didn't want people who happen to be in it early to have that much of an advantage that they log in day one and they're out of the map.
Yeah.
They can kind of map it on their own, so I have the feeling that the people who are playing a lot right now already know where a lot of the cool things are on that map. But still, I wanted to at least give people that are coming in for the first campaign a fighting chance.
Yeah.
And then we've got 5.3, which is what you and your fellow compatriots are spending most of your time on.
Yeah, that's been a lot of work.
So what is the 5.3 update?
Race and class split.
It is the race
It's something that everybody's
class
been
split.
chomping at the bits for. It's not just as simple as transferring the animations to these new rigs.
Right. Yeah. No, it was a complete re-architecture of the character system.
We had to go, okay, well, we're going to quadruple our animation budget. How are we going to bring this in? So there was some combining of rigs.
Yep.
So we have several races and classes that share rigs, but they have separate animations.
What is a rig?
A rig is the skeleton that controls the character's movement.
Okay.
And the closer that we the more that we confirm this, the quicker things kind of come out.
Okay, so talk about what characters you were able to combine and what characters you weren't, just because it's kind of an odd concept, right?
Yeah.
It's the interior skeleton of two totally different characters having the same rig seems a little odd.
Yeah, so what we started off with was the human females. So you, in the old Crowfall terms, we had the Templar, we had the Ranger, and we had the Confessor. And those were three separate rigs, but they were close enough in proportions that we were able to take the meshes, put them onto the, I think we used the Templar's rig as a base, and then we took all the dangly bits, all the extra bits, all the weapons, and then we moved all those skeleton pieces onto the Templar rig, and then we called this the Uber Female rig. And then we took all those animations from the Confessor, Templar, and Ranger, dumped it back on this Uber rig. So this consolidated down our move sets, our get hit animations, a lot of the like generic animations that we had. So this was a way that we were able to speed up production and also like shrink the size of the animations.
Okay, so you mentioned 3 of the females, but you didn't mention the Druid, for example. So why is the Druid on a different rig?
The Druid was such a vast difference as far as proportions. She was leggier, she was taller. It just wouldn't look right. We were still trying to maintain that quality, that uniqueness of the characters, and it was just too much of trying to fit that triangle piece in the circle slot. But what we did to help us out on that end was the Frostweaver, now the High Elf is going to share that rig.
Okay.
The Half Giant, which used to be the champion, is going to share the rig, share a rig with the Stoneborn. So what happens as soon as we get the Stoneborn model and we skin it, which skinning is attaching the skin to the bones, we get all those animations for free.
Well, with some cleanup though.
Right? That one's more direct.
Is it? Okay.
That one's a lot more direct. It's maybe a little bit of cleanup, but not as much as transferring and then like transferring from one rig to another.
Okay, so you mentioned dangly bits earlier, right? So
Yes.
so let's say you've got a character that has, a tabard, and the tabard hangs down a little bit, and then you use that same rig for another character that doesn't have that tabard, or a sheath, right? Something dangling like that. What happens to those bones?
They just get ignored in game.
Okay, so that basically, if they've got them, it animates. If they don't, then it doesn't.
It doesn't, and the overhead is Unity's documentation says negligible.
Negligible.
So that's one of the benefits to Unity.
Negligible.
Yeah. So they're
Not sure that I buy it.
I don't either, but we'll see. We have like a lot of performance investigation going on right now into that, and there's ways that we can negate that on the animation side too with mask. So what we ended up going back, so we consolidated several of the rigs. You have like the human male rig, you have the human female rig that covers the Nathari, the half elf, the human, the Nathari, human, half elf.
Who else is on that rig?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think that's it.
Don't you own that?
Yeah, I do. It's just so much. And then also what we had to do is, because now every single character can use all the different weapons. So that was a big undertaking that Cook took on himself. So what we did instead...
Well, they can't use all the weapons. They still have styles, right?
Yeah, they still have styles, but just so that equipping and unequipping weapon wasn't that heavy, because we were having to include...
Right, and we want to set ourselves up to be able to add more styles over time.
Future-proofing, exactly.
Right. Okay, so so talk about that just a little bit. So previous to this, basically every weapon that the male knight could use was technically in his hand. And when he was swinging, we would only make one of them visible, but actually in his hand, like there were 13 weapons, right?
Yes.
Or something like that.
Yeah, and then we would have to do that for every single character, and so you had a bunch of weapons that like were getting duplicated in game needlessly.
Right.
And so to improve performance, what we did was we exported all the weapons by themselves.
And
so
now
you have
snap it
every
into their hand.
exactly, and programmatically we snap them into the hand, and so that was a big undertaking because we had to go through and touch every single animation and make sure that those weapon nodes were correct. So we got a bulk of the work out of the way. We're done with that big pass, and now it's just transferring, cleaning up, and putting it in the game. If you want, we can show what we already have done right now.
So somebody asked the question, are they going to do open Q&A? We will do open Q&A, but we thought we had some topics that we basically for the last couple weeks, I've been occasionally jumping into topics on the forums and responded with, you know what, we'll just cover that in the Q&A. So I've got a list of those. It's on my phone, very fancy. I've got a list of those, and I said that we would cover them, so I figured we'd just get through them. It seemed reasonable to start with, what are we working on right now? So what's all the stuff going on? And the major pushes we have are basically the three we just covered, which is getting ready for Gamescom, because conferences are always a big deal. Trying to get the campaign test server up and running to the point where it's actually a playable campaign. Pretty big deal. And then the third one is we have about half the team running beyond Campaign World, working on race class split and all the other stuff, which is a whole different branch of code. So, so that's what we're basically talking through now is the animators are really taking a lot of the brunt of the work for that race class split. That's where most of the cost was incurred. And so that's why we started with that one. Seemed like a reasonable place to start.
And the thing is, like, one of the advantages that we have with our current tool set is that you take a character, let's say Human Knight, took us 2 man-months to make. With both me and Cook, it takes us about a month to make these characters.
Just for the animation part.
Just for the animation
Just for the
part.
animation part. Doesn't include the model, the texture, doesn't include the effects or the power design or putting all the powers together or any of the testing. Just the animation piece.
Yeah, exactly. And so the thing is, like with the race class split, at that pace, there's no way that we could get the game out.
Right.
At all.
Well, we have 2 animators.
Yeah,
right?
it would have taken us about 3 years to do all that work. So we had to be smart about it, which is...
that's a tough one.
Yeah, good thing there's Cook.
Yeah.
He's the brains, I'm the beauty. So that's the reason for the Uber rigs.
That's a scathing indictment of our animation team if I've ever heard one.
And so we had to go through and estimate how long it would take to transfer these animations to these different rigs for the race class split. And so what we ended up doing is, like, the worst case scenario is about 5 to 10 days to do about 2 months worth of work. And so that's what we were able to cut it down to. In some cases, it was 1 to 2 days. But that's a lot of 1 to 2 days of 5 days combined. It makes a pretty good chunk size, but it's still doable.
It is. And we brought in a little help, right?
Yes. In fact...
He's walking to the bathroom right now? Yeah, people love it when we call them out on the live stream when they're walking to the bathroom.
Well, yeah, I just want them to know. Anyway, so we did bring in help. It was somebody that we used to work with at Kings Isle, Brandon Shakely. He's a very talented animator, and he has been taking...
Not as talented as you, but pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good. He makes up for it in looks. He's much prettier than I am.
Oh, well, if he becomes the beauty and Cook becomes the brains, where does that leave you?
John O'Neill's servant, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
It's not a bad place to be.
It isn't. No, like...
like Alfred.
Yeah,
Batman.
That's right. I am Alfred to John O'Neill's Batman. Okay, back on. So he's been taking a brunt of the work, and he has been churning through these race classes. When we bring it up, you can see what's been done. And
we'll go ahead and bring it up. We've got a chart that shows all of the. So I was under the impression a lot of the race class stuff is outsourced using the additional funds from the backer investor thing, and that's true. So Brandon's not a full-time employee, so but he is not. He's insourcing effectively. He's not outsourcing. We wanted him to, in order to make sure that everything hits our style, we wanted to bring him internally and set him in the office. But he is not with us full-time. Well, he's a full-time contractor, but effectively he's taking the bulk of that work. And you guys are still picking up additional pieces of that as well, right?
Exactly. And so you look at the what we have up here, and you see what's done. You obviously see what's done, like where we have yes, that's what needs to be transferred. Next is what we're going to work on next. And there's a pretty good bit of work done. Now let's talk about the stuff that hasn't been done, the reason why we haven't gone to that one yet. Frostweaver, obviously we haven't started on the Frostweaver yet, so we can't transfer her out.
Right, we need to go back. And so originally we actually made a version of her, but all of that art was made very specific, single purpose. It couldn't be modified. It wasn't set up to use the multiple weapons. It wasn't set up for customization. So while that gave us an early entry that we were able to use, and even in the Kickstarter video, right, you see the Frostweaver female, that art unfortunately was very specific case use. It was great for prototyping, but we had to put put it through the entire ringer of concept to model to texture. And so we just haven't gotten to her yet.
Exactly. And
High Elf, I guess
High
we
Elf,
should say
yeah.
now.
High Elf and then the class Frostweaver. And so once we get those animations done, that's when Brandon will be able to transfer them out to the other characters you see on the Frostweaver tab, what other races can become a Frostweaver.
Yeah, so the yeses right there are, yes, we intend to do this one,
Yeah.
but we haven't gotten to him yet because there's nothing for him to transfer.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. So that even internally, by the way, we screw this stuff up all the time. I'll say, Frostweaver, and what I mean to say is High Elf.
Yeah.
Probably I meant to say specifically High Elf female Frostweaver. So we screw that up, and even just the naming conventions, it was a huge pain in the ass going back
Yeah.
and renaming and fixing all that stuff.
Oh yeah, we had to go in. Well, Cook mainly headed this one up too. He had to go in and he had to rename all the animations in the source files, and then all the animations in Unity. And right now, at the current count, we have 2,153 animations in the game.
All hand done.
All
right?
hand done. Yes.
Okay.
So that's a lot. That he did a fantastic job with that, and he's been working with Akshay to make sure that when we do roll this out, it's as seamless and smooth as possible.
Yep. That's the goal.
That's the goal.
That's never the way it works.
Never happens. There's always something there.
There's always stuff there, right? That's just, as these projects get larger and more complicated, the kind of interconnectivity means that inevitably things break. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a normal state of living for us, I suppose.
Yeah,
and we're
exactly.
definitely that point now. No question. So, on this chart, you say, for example, Frostweaver, the base powers aren't done, so you can't transfer those. We also have characters that just aren't done. High Elf being an example, but Stoneborn being another example. Right?
Yes.
The base character needs to be done. So that's another whole slice where we've got Stoneborn, for example, coming next. But you do have the champion, Myrmidon, and cleric all marked done. So how is that possible? You haven't done that model yet.
Yeah. And somebody just pointed out, it's interesting how Half Elf and Nathari Female Assassin are done, but not the Fey Assassin. You're correct. That's more of, I haven't updated the Fey Female Assassin yet. That's actually done.
Oh, is it done?
It's done.
Okay.
All the animations are done. We're in the review process. We're testing them out. We're going to, next couple days, we're going to run through with Melissa, make sure that everything's good on the female Fey Assassin animations, along with the ones that have been transferred out. And, you can see, the cleric, that's been done. That's off to effects. So there, animation is just one step in.
It
in the
is.
process.
So I guess we should point that out. Is this chart? Is it here?
Yes.
This chart is specifically your chart, you and Cook and Brandon. This is how you guys are managing the animation pipeline. This is not the last stop on the train, right? It still has
Exactly.
to go to
design and effects.
design and effects. So
Yeah.
so Aislinn and Greg will then rig up all the effects, and then it finally gets back on the plate of design, who have already mocked up, basically prototyped out all the powers using default animations and default effects.
Yeah.
To then go through and make sure everything is clean and tested, and then it goes to QA, and then it goes to you guys.
Exactly.
So
there's still a bunch of work to be done, but it's rolling out pretty quickly, and from the pace that we've been going animation wise, we're good on this. But they'll get done when they get done.
yeah, so that means that by the time race class comes online, which is 5.3, we'll be, I'm guessing, roughly halfway through this list.
Exactly.
Okay, so you'll see basically all the ones that are marked yes, and probably the ones that are marked next. But there'll be a whole bunch that still need to come online, and those will just trickle in over time.
Yeah, I can probably talk about this because we already did the Elkin Mail.
Yeah, sure.
So Brandon's in the process of doing all the transfers to the Elkin Mail, and Cook is working on the movement set. So that's coming in really quickly too.
Yeah, I
as
saw
far as
on his
animation-wise.
machine earlier today there was an Elkin with a bow. It
Yeah.
looked badass. Of course, I just think all the Elkins turned out looking
Yeah,
really cool.
he looked really good.
So, Murdeer.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a long explanation of what's coming on. I know everybody's really excited about this and wanting this to come out, and it's going to come out. We're going the biggest thing about doing this race class split decision was, can we do it?
Right, and I felt like if we wanted to ever take a shot at it, it had to be before launch. Like
Exactly.
trying after launch to then break archetypes into the two, I think would have been a giant nightmare. So that's why I kind of forced the issue internally. And it was painful. I mean, it was expensive and time consuming, but I just felt like it was the right decision for the game. So
Exactly. Yeah, and it's just it's the right thing. You're right. And we were able to, it wasn't something like, well, we have to do this, but we don't know if we can.
Yeah.
We answered both of those questions.
We did. We went through about a week, really, of being in this very room on the whiteboard with this chart, actually going through and doing estimates of how much time it was going to cost, and timed it out. And then I said, all right, well, I guess we need to go find some more money to make this happen. And then we did.
And, at first, like our estimates, we were like, it was going to be like 6-man months, and then you're like, can you bring that down? I was like, okay, let me go back in my corner and
let's figure out how
let's
how to
trim this
combine
down.
rigs. Let's figure out how to be smart about the weapons.
Yeah.
To make it all work. Somebody asked a question about what the racials are for High Elf. So we actually have internally drafted all of the racial runestones. So we know what we want all of them to be. We haven't, I think, and Blair has talked through a couple of them in a previous Q&A, and now we're also dropping them in detail. We're putting out basically detailed explanations of what each of the racials are. Those are subject to change like everything else is, but I think the racials is one of the coolest things to come out of this is that we can make races actually feel different, like significantly different between the powers and the passives and the animation sets. We can make them really feel like a more than just a cosmetic choice that I'm making, and I think that's really cool.
Well, wouldn't you say like one of the biggest ones would be like the assassins? Oh, the phase wing.
Yeah, that's a good one, right? But the Ganetian, moving Burrow to be a racial power as opposed to it being specifically something for duelist is just really interesting.
Yeah.
Right, the Elkin has some really interesting stuff that you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. Did that one go out yesterday? Is that going out tomorrow?
Which one?
The Elkin?
The Elkin's already gone out. There's one coming out Thursday.
Okay. So, yep. So, anyway, I think it's gonna. I think that's a decision that we made. It was painful to do at the time, but I think we're gonna see a payoff for that over hopefully years.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And we also made sure that we future-proofed it so that going forward, we add anything is easier.
In fact,
than the
some of
initial
these, interestingly enough, some of these combinations are going to be pretty cheap, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
Because the human male, human female is using the same rig as an Athari, or because it's using the same rig as half elf, doing a half elf confessor should be incredibly cheap, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah, which is
Yeah.
really cool. So I think that what you'll see after we launch is we'll go back over time and we'll fill in this chart more. And it becomes more of a narrative decision of, hey, do we like the idea? With the Nathari is a great example, is confessors specifically. We decided that we were just going to make them kind of jerks and they were going to be very exclusive as a club. So, but we thought, hey, it'd be interesting is let's go ahead and put the Elkin in there because the Elkin is specifically mentioned in their holy writings. And so that, it leads to some really interesting combinations. I think the Elkin is probably my favorite from a sheer combinations. The specific classes that were available to Elkin played out really well for the Elkin.
Oh, and he just poses so well. Like,
He does. He just looks
the
majestic.
screenshots that we released last week just look amazing.
So that was a narrative decision that I thought was really interesting too. Is we have two races that very specifically are animal-headed races, right? You got the Minotaur and you got the Elkin. The Centaur is upper body human. The other two are upper body animal. So to make them really pop and be different, we wanted the Minotaur to be very savage, very barbaric. So I thought it would be very interesting to go the opposite direction with the Elkin and make them very noble, make them almost more civilized in look than the humans, but then give them that savagery, which is the image that Dave drew of Dorian sitting on the throne, where he looks majestic and he looks noble, but he's eating a heart.
Yeah.
I thought that was such a cool juxtaposition, such a cool contrast, and so that's I think that race has turned out to be incredibly cool. I like where they've ended up. So, all right, so let's see. So. Other stuff that I have you doing right now.
If it fits, it
that?
sits. If he fits, he sits.
So the capture mechanics, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so our game is Throne War.
Right,
Crowfall
it is
is a Throne War, and I think it was a missed opportunity to not be able to sit on the throne. I think we all agree on that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, to get the campaign worlds up and running quickly, we went with the most simple capture mechanics we could, which was basically create the forts and the keeps, and initially we're like, take the dragon statue, throw it in there. That'll be the respawn point, and you'll also claim just by walking up and tapping that thing. And we're going to change that over time. It won't be as simple as a tap mechanic. You will once we eventually get NPC guards in, you'll need to clear those guards out, and then once you do that, you'll be able to capture. We're also now splitting those two pieces of functionality, though, so the respawn mechanic is not the same as the capture mechanic, right? So we're moving it from the dragon statue to where you'll claim by claiming the throne, right? So, and what do we want to do with the throne claiming?
So you're gonna have a generic animation of you claiming the throne.
Okay.
And then what happens when you claim the throne is you're going to be able to sit on the throne.
Actually sitting on the throne.
And the first step for us, animation-wise, is just it's probably going to be a flash, and you're going to be sitting. You're not going to see them actually sit down.
And I think that's fine. I don't know that we ever need to do much more than that, to be honest.
Yeah,
we'll see how it looks, and if it's too jarring, we'll adjust. But my guess is it'll probably be fine. So you'll have to sit on the throne majestically for some period of time, right?
Exactly.
And hope nobody knocks you off.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, it's good to be king.
Yeah. Yes, it is. So we have some examples of how that might look of characters sitting on the throne?
Yeah, let's pull up the human male. Wait a second for it to come up. I think this is Todd's first time seeing some of these, so we'll get his reaction. All right, so this was actually the second pass that I did on the human male.
Okay.
The first pass, if you can show the other one, Jack. This one, in about 10 seconds, was a little too relaxed.
A little too slouchy?
A little
Didn't
too
feel
slouchy.
majestic enough for you?
This would be better off for like the half giants, like somebody that's a little bit more cash.
Yeah, okay.
So that's the reason why, going back to the other one, he's a little bit more regal, sitting down. So there's also stuff that we can do to kind of randomize these sitting animations. They're really quick to do, so we can let's say if we want something very specific for the night, we can have like the classic Conan, with the sword.
Yep.
That's not going to work with everything that he has, like all the weapons that he has, but it might be cool.
Reminds me of the iconic images of Conan sitting. Yep.
Yeah. Let's pull up the female sitting, the human female sitting. She, so this is her sitting. I think
so that's not the human, actually. That's the half-elf.
Yeah, half-elf.
But it's the same rig.
Same rig. So, so what happens is one animation can work for 4 characters with this, if we want it.
Cool.
So we might have variations for the Nathari, the human, and the half-elf coming in here, but initially we just have this to see if it works. Again, some considerations that we have to take with the thrones is we have contact points that John and Aaron need to make sure that this is always here, that she always has something to put her hand on.
Right, yeah, that makes sense.
But
and well, if it's a little wider or thinner, she'll adjust for it? She actually is kind of attaching to it? Or do you just say, hey, her hand's always going to be here?
Her hand's always going to be here, so we're going to need the geometry here. It can be wider, but it can't be like
okay,
shorter.
But it can't stick out or to clip her fingers.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
So this comes to one of the biggest challenges I've had in my career. How do you make a centaur sit on the throne?
Oh, right. Good point. Good point.
So my first initial thought was, don't make him sit on the throne. Make him sit around the throne, I guess.
I was pretty insistent, though, that he needed to sit.
He needed to sit
on the throne.
So this was, I actually like this idea. This was something Melissa came up with about like, are you bringing that up?
I'm about to, yeah.
Okay. Instead of him trying to fit into the seat, maybe he's like off to the side and around it. But this wasn't the original vision that you had, Tom.
No, the problem that I had with this version is he's not actually sitting on the throne, right? And so it just didn't quite work for me. I felt like, and the other consideration was you weren't allowed to change the throne.
Yeah.
We've already invested in the throne asset. I don't want you changing it. So.
Yeah. So I'm a pleaser, so like I'm going to try and make Todd happy. Here's some of the alternatives. Let's show like. I'm never going to be able to get a job after this, Todd.
This one's my favorite. Not that one.
Okay, okay, I can see
So-
where you're going there.
Yeah, so
Uh-huh,
he's lounging. His bits are kind of in the face, but he doesn't have bits. I mean, this is game.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. He's a little comfortable there from showing off his. Well, he's a Ken doll, so I guess we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So I personally like this one, but when you're doing R&D, you just can't stop at the first one. So let's see, like my other
Yeah,
alternative.
yo, what else you got?
Yeah.
What else you got? Okay, I can see where you're going with that. Kind of had to back his way into that one.
Yeah, he's
there.
kind of curled up on there. Very proud, sassy.
Yeah, does he is the butt actually embedded in the back of that chair? Like where are the lower legs? Because
Oh,
of the rear legs.
yeah, he's curled up like a cat back there. Like so that was something, but
So I like that you got the upper body though to try going noble enough to try and distract from what's going on the south side.
Yeah.
I think that helps. What do you have others?
Yeah, like I wanted him to be a little bit more firmly in the throne. So let's pull up that. Like I have two variations of him. Well,
Okay,
yeah,
which
that
is the
was
variation?
that was a
That's that first
variation
one,
of
right?
lounge.
Okay.
And then we're going to have like him sitting.
Okay, that works pretty well.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. He's a little tall. I mean,
Yeah, he's a little tall.
But I think all of our buildings interiors are pretty peaked. So I
Yeah.
think he would probably fit.
And this one I decided to modify a little bit because I think he wasn't proud enough in this one. Can we bring up the next one?
Okay, starting to get a little bit more casual again.
Yeah.
That's a Conan kind of look, I suppose.
Yeah, it is.
Sort of.
Yeah. And yeah, you have this, and this last one, I think this was a group effort. Well, this was.
Oh, this
team
is the
effort.
one where I said it needed to be heroic.
Yeah,
you
more
needed
heroic.
to go a little bit more heroic.
And he needs to be fully on the throne. I think that was the direction that you gave me. So
This is the best one.
there you
yeah,
go.
okay, there you go.
And so this is what I like to call this segment. If it fits, he sits. So, all joking aside, I think we are going to put all of these sitting animations.
That's what I suggested. Is I think they need.
Indian style.
I think it needs. We can add more. I think it should randomly pick one of these when the centaur. What's funny is all the other characters fine. Like the Ganeshan has a little sit that he does right now where he just plops it down.
Yeah, we just
and
gonna-
you just put him up in the chair. That would
Yeah.
totally work. So this guy was the one that was the real puzzler, and I think you've come up with not one but a half a dozen or more
Yeah.
fantastic solutions to
Yeah.
this one.
And I think the thing is, you have to embrace the weird when you have something that's weird, trying to do something mundane like sitting. So embrace the weird is where we're going to go with this.
Yeah.
You change it like every minute, like he's trying to get comfortable.
Yeah.
All right,
So-
I'm gonna let them start asking you guys questions.
Okay. So other things that we talked about that we were supposed to handle. So we talked quite a bit about 5.3. I told people that we would talk. So there were a lot of questions about PCM, a power cost multiplier, and why that hasn't been, why there are issues with that that are pretty clear that have not been addressed in the current test environment. So I promise you we won't get off of this live stream without talking about projectiles. So, we're going to talk about, I wanted to talk about just the general branches and what's going on there so you guys would understand that. So you have been spending all your time in what we call the 5.3 branch, which
Yes.
is the next big revision. In testing right now, we are on the 5.2 branch, and so smaller changes are added directly into that 5.2 dot whatever branch. So last week it was 5.2 5.2, and this week it's 5.2.3, and this week it'll be 5.2.4, and the next week it'll be 5.2.5. So we kind of bucket things up and we put them into the branches. For example, Andy last week on Friday was working on the sliding issue, right, where players are able to totem pole on each other's heads. And he said, hey, I think I have a fix for that. Should I put it in? And I said, no, don't do that, because it's Friday and that's a low-level change. I don't want to risk that blowing up on the test. So instead, that got pushed into 5.2.4. Sometimes things are fundamental or based on things that are fundamental, and for that reason, we don't want to put them into the current branch. So the example that I'll give is we just made a bunch of changes to inventory that basically, under the covers, was dealing with some issues that are fairly boring, but for whatever reason, the engineer and the designer sat down and went through it and said, hey, the inventory system really isn't up to snuff to deal with the issues that we're hitting now. And those issues we're hitting now are things like local banks, world banks, cleaning up the Spirit Bank, and secure trading, right? Yeah. So we felt like it was time to go back and solidify that system. That's a giant change, right? Inventory is one of the cores. I mean, everything ties into inventory.
And that needs to be like airtight.
It does, yeah. Otherwise, you get duping problems, and you get item loss, and you get blah, 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 blah.
Player
blah.
loss at that
yeah,
point.
Exactly. Well, we have vessels, right?
Yeah.
So for us, it ties into characters. So you don't want to make that kind of a change in a point release. So with that, instead, went into the 5.3 branch with all the race class stuff. So as a result of that, for example, we just brought on world banks. So now in the current test environment, you can run up to a bank and open it up and put stuff in it. It's not your Spirit Bank, doesn't require import-export. You can walk up to it, put stuff in it, go somewhere else, open up your bank, pull that stuff out. We don't want that eventually. We don't want world banks, but it was the easiest way to get a version of banking in with the old inventory system. So we've already done the work on what we really want, which is local banks. Local banks meaning that I go and take over this fort, I put stuff into the bank at that fort, and if I go to another bank and I open it up, I don't see it. So that actually is functional in the 5.3 branch, but because of reasons that I probably don't need to get into, just technical reasons, it didn't make any sense to take all of that work and go dump it in the 5.2 branch, because it would have been a whole bunch of wasted effort to support a system that had already been pulled out of the game. So PCM is one of those examples where there are changes that are coming related to powers build out, specifically loadout, and the data tables have been restructured. And it just doesn't make sense to go back and support a version of the game where that is a dead end. Like we know that branch of the system has already fundamentally been changed. Supporting it would be a giant amount of effort internally that then we would just have to redo, or has already been redone, in the 5.3 branch. So the downside of that, it means that people who are in and testing every weekend sometimes have to suffer through stuff that we know is kind of broken. It's like, yeah, I know that's broken. I'm sorry that it's broken, but it's not worth it for us to go and fix it in this old version of the game that to you guys seems completely fresh, but to us, half of our development team has already run forward and left that whole thing in the dust.
Yeah.
So projectiles is another good example of this. So let's talk a little bit about projectiles, because we actually have already prototyped internally a change to the projectile system, but we've done it in the 5.3 branch. And I don't want to, for reasons related to overall efficiency of the internal resources, I don't want to go back and fix it in the 5.2 branch, because that would be a giant waste of effort, right? So let's talk about what that solution is now. I just wanted you to explain why some of these things, you guys on the forums are like, this has been in there forever. Why haven't they fixed it? Well, sometimes it's just we haven't gotten to it. Sometimes it's because it's actually been addressed or is being addressed in a new version that you guys haven't seen. And of course, sometimes it's because we either can't reproduce it or we just disagree. And that happens as well.
Yeah, and also sometimes you have to wait on converging technologies to fully implement it, because you don't want, you just don't want to break the entire game because it's not fully implemented, or break that entire system.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And so you want to wait until like it's at least testable.
Or you're waiting on something else. For example, John O'Neill. I know I said I do projectiles. Now I'm just playing it out a little bit. John O'Neill is currently waiting on the environment shader for a bunch of his changes. Somebody reported, hey, with the new lighting, it's very hard for me to tell the difference between slag and cobblestone. Totally agree, actually. I got in, I was like, that's true. So I put in a bug for John O'Neill. Hey, the lighting made this hard to tell the difference. And he came to my desk this morning and was like, yeah, but we're waiting on the environment shader from Sid, and that's not going to be available until some future version. I said, like, you're right. Mark your bug as waiting on that bug, and when that bug is fixed, then we'll do it. Okay, so there you go. So now you guys understand the stuff. So let's actually talk about projectiles. So, projectiles as a concept. So, for archery in general, archery is a pretty powerful thing. I want to separate out this conversation into two different things. One is archery and the other is rangers, because I think those two things right now are being munged together, and they don't have to be. There's no reason that rangers, just because they have a core focus on archery, have to be treated the exact same way archery is treated for all other characters. So I want archery to be a discipline, and as far as so that it is available to a large swath of our characters. This causes you guys endless amounts of pain, because archery, unlike most of the disciplines, requires a hell of a lot of animation support.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it's not just a question of, hey, let's use a couple of our generic casting animations. And it's not just a question of, hey, give me another weapon that I can put in my hand, like the difference between even a two-handed sword and a one-handed sword, which is very expensive. It's an entire, like, stance. It's an entire animation set, right?
Yeah, so a movement set, a standing set, even out of combat, where do we put that bow?
Right, absolutely, which we still haven't quite figured that one out yet, right? So, so I want to support archery, and I want to do it for all the characters, but I don't want it to become the default thing that all the characters take, and every character in the game now has archery. That just seems overwhelming to me. So to me, the idea of ammo, which I'm not opposed to, I actually like the idea of ammo. The idea of ammo was a counterbalance to the overwhelming, what I was afraid of, proliferation of archery. Okay, that's reasonable, and I can hear your arguments. I don't even have to look at your arguments for why you don't like it, especially if you're a ranger. So here's a counter proposal that I think could potentially work for rangers, is somebody, and I talked to a lot of people on dev forums, so I've heard a lot of the ideas, and this is the one that I think that I like the best. It's the one that we're actually prototyping and testing right now, which is, let's treat archery for rangers a little bit different than the way we treat archery and ammo for all the other characters. So we continue to have stacks of arrows. I've already, in this latest version, asked for the stack size to be increased, and I've already asked for the crafting bundle size to be increased. I think that's already in. In addition to that, I think the idea of a quiver, which works differently, is just a kind of a cool idea. So let's say as a ranger, I have a slot where I normally drag my arrows. Give me a crafting recipe that maybe is only for use by rangers, where I can also drag a quiver there, and that quiver effectively gives me infinite arrows with some kind of decay. So it works effectively the same way other weapons do. It works the same way that a longsword would, or a helmet, or whatever. So then the non-art ranger characters that are choosing to have archery because they want it, but they don't want it so badly they became a ranger, maybe they have to work a little bit harder to get it. So the natural, I just take archery, means I do have to use stacks of arrows. Then if I really want to invest in it, I can earn my way up to being a ranger, but I have to do so using disciplines, either major or minor disciplines.
And that also brings in like some interesting like gameplay aspects. Let's say you're defending against a siege and you want a bunch of archers on the wall. That's a full-time job, keeping them supplied.
It is. It is, unless they've invested their character's identity in it. And that's what I don't want. It's all about, to me, it's investment, right? It's about choices. And I think part of the problem was, with the Rangers specifically, is Rangers had already made that investment choice, right? They decided to be a Ranger, and therefore it felt incredibly punishing to them to have to go and harvest and craft as a resource type. And that was something that we weren't doing with any of the other characters. So I totally get that. That makes sense to me. But if I'm not choosing to be a ranger, I'm choosing to be an Elkin Confessor and I also want a bow,
Yeah.
then I don't feel so bad about making it hard on them, right? That feels more reasonable to me. Because then we can, so another piece that we had planned on doing but hadn't gotten to yet was having a second quiver slot. That you could specifically have, and I think Rangers would be a good candidate for this, and a hotkey to toggle between the two. So that would give me the ability now, as a Ranger, with a quiver slot, I can drag a quiver item to it, or I can drag a stack of arrows. That's pretty cool. Give me now 2 of those slots, and I could drag a quiver to one, and a stack of specialty arrows to another. So I have flaming arrows, and those do have to be crafted in a stack, perhaps, and I put those in my second slot. Well, now I have the ability to toggle between them, which would be pretty cool, and because they're both equipment slots, in most of the world bands, they would now be protected, so that if I die, I'm not forced to go back and replace those slots every time.
Yeah.
Then on the other side, characters who choose to invest in archery as a secondary profession, so they've made it as a discipline, maybe we offer those things up a la carte, but to be able to get them, you have to go and take disciplines. So this isn't all set yet, we're just prototyping it, but I'm trying to give you guys an idea of like philosophically where I'm coming from, and I've heard your complaints. I think they're very valid complaints, and I'm trying to make the play pattern match your expectations. I just don't want to give it away for free. That's my thought. So anyway, now that I've said all that, let me see how the people respond to it. Anthridge, it seems like, is okay with it. Soul Reaver, I'd love to hear your response. I don't know where it was. Let me see. Let me see what he said, because he's probably the most prolific. Okay, you're talking quivers. Choosing changing arrows, which is an 8 part of the class, would be accomplished. So I think I covered that as well. So, can you explain a bit more as the Ranger having a free resource? I think I covered all that. So, when will you see the quiver? So that's a great question. So the quiver is right now in the 5-3 branch. And the reason for that was because reasons. And as it turns out, in order to hit that particular recipe table, it would require it required a complete restructuring of the way that design table is set up in our design repository. So it was hey, we really can't prototype. I asked them to prototype it, and they said, well, to prototype it, it mean I'd have to port over this functionality and this entire set of design tables into 5.2. That's going to cost like a programmer a week, which is worth gold around here. A programmer a week, especially a game system programmer, I don't want to chew that up. Or they were like, we can do it in 5.3 right now. I said, all right, let's prototype it there. My suspicion is we're going to all decide this is better. And it's not a set yet because I also want you guys to try it. So what I want to do is get in and have you guys try it out in the test, and then we'll probably adapt it. But this gives us a chance to get it in. We can try it out. It'll come out with the race class stuff. I don't know exactly when that's going to hit. Between here and there, we need to finish up campaign world testing, and we need to get the actual siege wrapper mechanics in and tested too. Because right now, campaign world is pretty close, but we still need to get the actual siege mechanics turned on. So we're not quite there. After that, then it'll come. If we can get a version of 5.3 that looks solid enough, I'm not even opposed to pausing in campaign world testing and putting that on up on test and trying it. But I wouldn't get my hopes up because that's contingent on having a version of 5.3 that's stable enough. And my guess is there have been so many changes on it that when we are actually in and playing it initially, it's going to be a bit of a train wreck.
Yeah.
So that seems to be the way it is. And race class is a fundamental change,
Yeah.
right? So
yeah, exactly. I mean,
so all right. So I'm trying to see if there's anything else. So Soul Reaver actually now is flipping to the other side, which is very fair, which is, hey, this shouldn't just be free for Rangers. And I think that's a fair point. So we'll have to make sure that it doesn't make now Rangers them just overbalanced. And that we have a tendency to do that, right? That everybody does is you see a problem, it's a really bad problem, you kind of attack it from multiple vectors, and when those all hit, they do tend to swing the pendulum too far in the other direction. No matter how much you try to protect against it, some of that always happens. So we'll need to test that and see. I do think it's very respectable that those of you who have been the most vocal about this being a problem are also concerned about being a problem in the other direction. So that's great, and I thank you guys for that. That's something that I think I appreciate a lot about our community, is they're not looking for their class or their particular build to be the best. They're looking for their build to be a solid build so that they can actually be strong in the areas that they want to be strong, but also recognize that the game's not fun unless their build is weak in other areas too.
Exactly,
So,
and there's the benefits of, like you said, like overcompensating and swinging the pendulum to the other side, because you want to see it break the other way just to see why it breaks.
And that does
where it
happen
broke
too,
from.
right? Yeah.
And that's all a part of balancing, is you don't fine tune it. You kind of do this, and it comes in.
well,
You know,
so
as you're hitting
I'm
all
glad you
those-
brought that up. I think it's a Sid Meier tactic for design. If I'm crediting the wrong person, I'm going to apologize for that. But there's a design philosophy of having and doubling, right? Which is, if you're not quite sure where you're going to fall out on something mathematically, the best way to get there is to take your situation you're in right now and cut it in half. And is it still a problem? Cut it in half again. Is it still a problem? Cut it in half again. Oh, now that looks like we overshot the mark. Well, let's go half back up the way we were. So it's a way of kind of winnowing in on the solution by either doubling your number or halving your number, because then you are swinging the pendulum, but you're also narrowing in on that window to try and find the right solution. So that is a design tactic that we use to find it. To somebody who's outside and is not a part of those conversations, it does look like we are dramatically tilting the playing field. It never really occurred to me how that would look if you didn't know that we were doing it on purpose. But yeah, that we absolutely do that sometimes. And there are so many moving parts, right, in these things too, that it's impossible for any one person to adequately judge how one change over here will affect every single place that it touches. And so a lot of our bugs are because somebody touched something and it's like, oh, we didn't even realize that was. I'll give you an example from this morning. This morning we had a situation with the thrones, right, where the thrones were popping up either like under like halfway embedded in the floor, or like completely outside of the building completely, like the thrones weren't there. And we were like, that's really weird. Why is it? Well, it turns out that a default was set back in Siege Perilous that a claimable object should actually be a rigid body physics object for reasons. And I can't even tell you why. But as a result of that, these things were actually interacting with the physics layer in a way that if they were embedded in anything like the floor or the ground or anything, like if they were even barely clipping, it would try and explode them, because that's how destruction works, right? If it needs to, it says, hey, the physics object or the physics server says these two things are not allowed to embed, so I need to blow them apart. So that throne was attempting to basically destroy itself, like blow away from that floor. But there's some other code in there that's like, no, you sit right here. This is your spot. So it was actually causing a significant hit on the server too, a performance hit, probably 5 or 10% of our performance on the server, with those two different rules fighting, saying, hey, you need to blow up. No, you need to sit right there. No, you need to blow up. No, you need to sit right there. So it's stuff like that until somebody, and this is an innocuous one, it wasn't like a person sat down and said, I bet our thrones object is trying to explode on the server. And nobody knew that, right? But we had two different bugs in the system, so two different people were looking at it. Jonathan was trying to figure out why the thrones were thunking inside the floor or disappearing, and Stephen, who's specifically looking at server performance. They were both trucking along and suddenly find out that those two bugs are actually the same bug. So that's the one of the morning. Like every morning when I walk into stuff like this. It keeps the job interesting, but it also, you sit back, you're like, why did we make that call way back in Siege Perilous? And again, it's always for reasons. Best of intentions, right?
So do we go on to raycast and projectiles?
Soul Reaver did have a question about that.
Okay, where was it?
In there.
Can you elaborate on the different classes, the difference in choices for raycast and projectiles? Are you going? Okay, so I'm not going to actually tackle that question. That's really more of a question for Blair and Hallish. So there's a lot, you guys will probably recognize this if you start to look at my replies on the forums. Like I have a really, really good general knowledge of what everybody does here and how things work and how it all ties together. But there's a level of detail to which I just I'm not great at it, and I don't go there. I have to trust in the other people on the team to do it. So I have a pretty good idea of how you do what you do, but there's no way I could sit down and actually do what you do, except for some of those centaur poses. I'm pretty sure I could have done that. Yeah. So that's basically the case across the entire organization. Like, I am absolutely fit the kind of the mold of jack of all trades, master of none. So when it comes to individual, like, hey, why is this particular power broken? I might actually know that. Like, why is the chain pull broken? Okay, well, that has to do with this particular thing that Andy's working on in the movement system that will be resolved, and some of it is already in 5.3, so will we get it done? I don't know. If you ask me, like, well, why do you feel like the knight needs a chain pull? That's really more of a question for Blair and Halish. You know, I have ideas. Like, for a long time, I pushed, hey, I really want the knight to be able to have some kind of a shield bash where he can use it in a particular, even if it's a rare occasion, he can use it to knock somebody off a wall, because I just thought that was a cool part of his power. And a lot of times Blair will push back on that and say, like, no, no, that's just not going to be good for that class. And okay, if I feel super strongly about it, I'll kind of get more insistent, and there's always a negotiation. He calls it the creative director tax. CD tax. But that level of detail, I mean, you guys a lot of times will have power meetings after I've signed off on, yeah, I agree, I think we should not have legionnaires and instead we should have clerics as a base archetype. When it comes down to the actual powers meeting, where you guys will sit down with Blair and Halish and Greg, you know, you guys have your power meetings effectively. If I've already looked at the big chart and I'm like, yeah, it looks good to me, I don't even sit in on those meetings. Because that's just I can't, quite frankly, there's just not enough time in the day for me to be involved with every single decision at that detail level. So instead, I just haunt the halls and go by your desk and go, what you working on? Yeah. And give you shit if I think it's turning out bad, right?
Yeah. Well, there's also a certain trust you have to have in the team that they know.
Yeah, I don't have a choice. I don't like it.
Well, you can't do everything.
No, I can't. In fact, there's a lot of things I can't do. A whole lot around here. So
Skreeling had a good one. With the race class split, are there chances post-launch of introducing new races / classes?
Yes, and actually the cost for that has gone down. The second part of that was, has this escalated those costs? And actually the cost has come down now. So if we wanted to create, well, a new combo, like we want to, what was one of the combos that we talked about earlier? I can't remember. So, like a Fey Knight. I don't think we put Fey Knight on the list, right? I actually think the idea of a Fey Knight is kind of cool. Like an Eldritch, you know, the idea of an Eldritch Knight or Fey Knight would be pretty neat. Thematically, I actually think it's kind of cool too. But we don't have it. It's not on the list, right? If you look at Knight, Fey Male, Female, it's blank. So what would be the cost to do a Fey Knight? Fey Knight, male and female?
We're that's going to be like 3 days animation.
Really?
Yeah.
That's pretty cheap.
Yeah, 3 to 5 days giving.
So you could put in an extra weekend and crank that one out for me.
Yeah, or cook.
Or cook.
He has kids. So like, why would he want to go home on the weekends? Well, and there's also some that are like infinitely cheaper. Let's say a half-elf knight, because we have the human Uber rig.
Yep.
Those animations are already done. It's a little bit of effects and design work to flip that switch. So that's like, instead of maybe 2 weeks combined for the entire team to bring this online, this might be like 3 to 4 days to bring everything online. And so we did a lot of scrambling in the beginning to future-proof a lot of this so that it could come on a lot quicker.
So I actually think that if we wanted to add another class, which we've actually talked about, I know which one we would do next, for example. And in fact, I already asked Blair and Halish to change the Bard discipline so that it is called the Minstrel discipline, to leave the name Bard open, because that to me has a nice symmetry to it. Having another rogue or scoundrel class would actually be great. And that would give us 12 and 12. So that's the one that to me I would love to get in next. But we've got a pretty full plate right now. So instead of actually asking for it by launch, because I've asked for a lot,
Yeah.
and I probably should stop. Instead, I just asked them to mark off the boundaries of that one so that we know where it could go later. But there's a ton of additional races I'd love to do, and I think classes would be pretty clear how we would do them now. So.
Yeah.
This also put us in a position, I think, where it would be much easier for us to go and add these over time.
Mm-hmm.
So how is the stealth system coming? It is coming along, but and some of it we had to get done because it was tied to Faye, and so the work was originally scheduled for the Faye when Faye was still the assassin. So you'll see some of that in the Faye passive, right? We've got some of that stuff coming. But the majority of the system, which is also tied to tracking, is not currently being worked on because we just haven't had time to get to it yet. It is incredibly important to me. It is one of my favorite parts of Shadowbane was our tracking and our stealth system, kind of the hunter or the assassin anti-stealth play.
Yeah.
The mini game there was really, really cool. So I've got bold ideas for it, but we just haven't had time yet. And it's not, I don't think it's going to be that hard. It's not like a massive major system. It's just another damn thing. And that's the problem. We're to that point in the project now where everything is just another damn thing.
And we need to be able to spend the right amount of time on it instead of making it an afterthought.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Can you scroll up just a little bit?
I can try.
Hyrule had a good one. In 5.3, we'll lose the immediate recognition of R-type silhouettes. Are you worried at all a human male emplate will look too identical across its 4 classes?
It is a concern. I'd agree with that. So now the animations, though, are not the same.
No,
right?
so you'll have a different like combat stance. Like the cleric's combat idol is different than the knight's combat idol. You'll also notice like somebody coming at you with a hammer and a shield most likely is going to be a cleric.
Right.
There's also effects to take into account that when the effects are very, very clued into the classes, not the races.
Yeah.
So the effects have a very specific look for like, as opposed from a knight to a champion to a Templar.
Yeah.
Like, in fact, like one could say you could easily confuse the knight and the Templar until you get into like the combat idol is completely different, the weapon is completely different, and the effects that are coming off of them. And there is that.
Yeah. So yes, I agree. And no decision, or very rarely do you have a time when there isn't some negative associated with some design decision. That's because there's kind of, it's always a negotiation and a give and a take. That is one that is kind of an unfortunate. We can try to deal with it in ways like
we'll
the
try to
stances.
mitigate it as much as possible.
We can try to mitigate it. Post launch, I wouldn't even mind going back and looking at doing some modifications to some of the things. It is what it is, right? To me, when I looked at all of the pros and all the cons, it just, I couldn't see that being good enough reason to not do it. It just, the amount of variability we got and character customization that we got was pretty significant. So, so ultimately, you make a call on all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, I had a question. How is the history generation of the campaign worlds going? It's really not yet. We haven't gotten to that. We are still putting together all the campaign worlds by hand. I think that the world generation will probably be one of the last things that we get to. It may be that for launch we actually find that it's easier to initially build our lineup of worlds by hand and then work on the procedural generation stuff after. We'll see. The important thing is that we have enough wide variety of campaign worlds coming initially that every individual campaign you come to feels different. It feels unique. It feels like a fresh game and a fresh map.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Factories are something that we need to have by launch. It is also something that we haven't gotten to yet, so it's hanging out there. Interestingly enough, a lot of the kind of like marking out the territory for the Bard, marking out the territory for the factories has been done. Like the design tables and the skill training tables do take into account the assumption that those will be coming online and has made space for them. And basically said, all right, and this part they'll get out of factories. So that's something that we do need to have. It's not something that I can push off in worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So at least one class seems like it won't get a ranged or stealth tray, so it'll probably be an ultimate factor when balance is a priority. So we are doing a full refactor in 5.3 of the way the power system tray loadout works, right? So where we're going to land with it is that characters have multiple trays, and those trays are basically different stances, right? And taking a particular race, class, or discipline can actually add an entire new stance to my character. There's a key that toggles you in and out of that stance, so they can have a cooldown. And then I can even do loadouts separate for those. And those loadouts can even include passives, I believe. So that I can say, hey, when I'm in my stealth mode, I want the following 3 passives. But when I'm in melee mode, I want these 3 passives. So this system is about to get a lot more robust and meaty. I think it's going to be really, really cool. It also cleaned up for you guys. It cleaned a lot of things up because now you just have to worry about transitions completely into and out of the stances, not all the crazy, well, what happens if I'm in melee and I go into stealth and then I go into range? Like, it just cleaned the system up quite a bit for y'all. And that work is being worked on right now. So that actually is part of 5.3. So we'll do an update on that at some point soon, and we'll show you some pretty new UI and talk about in more detail how that stuff is going to work. So
it is 12:04.
Okay, so Blazin asked a question, and Screelings gave the correct answer, which you're done. It's if I give you information about why XYZ class has this or that particular power, I'm just going to be wrong. I'm going to cause a bunch of headache for Blair and Hallish as they have to step in and go, no, that's actually not accurate. So I'm gonna push the detail level questions off to those guys, because otherwise I have some ideas, but my information is often out of date, or they've gone through and they're either planning to make some changes or they've already made some changes that I'm not aware of. So I'm going to have to push all the power related questions off to them. So reminds me of the Shadowbane combat stances. It is similar, but quite frankly, it's actually better engineered and architected than the Shadowbane stances were. The Shadowbane stances were, oddly enough, kind of hacked in over a weekend. I remember one of my co-founders, Blanton, had the idea that we should do stances, and he pitched it. And we figured out that we could do it between him and James Nance and me. We were able to kind of slam it in using the power system over the weekend. And it did create a very interesting rock, paper, scissors game, which was kind of cool. But I always felt that it could have been a lot cleaner in the implementation.
Will stealthers need to be out of combat to go into stealth with the new power tray stop mechanics?
Yeah, I think that it is a much cleaner mechanic, but I haven't actually seen it yet. So it's in prototype right now. So I haven't walked, I probably shouldn't have talked about it yet because it leads to questions. I haven't actually had a prototype of it, but it does impact how you move in and out of those things. It also impacts harvesting, which I think is an area that we could do quite a bit more to make that system more fun and engaging. So we're taking a look at that at the same time. So rather than me going off half-cocked and giving you incorrect answers, let me just kind of leave that out there as a teaser and say that we'll have a future update coming soon where we talk about that stuff in more detail. So second crafting pass for 5.4 or 5.5. I don't know. I don't actually know when that's going to come. I do know that there's some UI work that needs to be done there. Before that happens, either in maybe even 5.2, but if not 5.2, certainly in 5.3, I want to start to move all the recipes where they're supposed to belong, which is over onto the crafting stations, because that's causing a lot of misjudgment right now in terms of assumptions about how the system is going to work. So has there been any headway into finding the issue and fixing the Ranger machine gun bug? We are looking at it. We have some videos that have been submitted and we're trying to track it down. That is a tough one for us. It shouldn't be happening, right?
So can you explain the machine gun bug?
Basically, it seems like the rapid fire effects of their rapid fire power are being applied to their basic left click attack, allowing them to get 100% attack power on their left click, and it's rapid firing, like I don't know how many arrows, but it's an insta kill. Like if you get hit by it at 100%, it just takes you out. And we've got a video, and I don't know how it's happening yet. So I will say, if anybody out there knows how this is happening, please don't sit on that information because we'll get it eventually. It just means that it's going to chew up more engineering cycles for us to find it. If you actually know how to do it, please just tell us so we can get it done and move on to other more important things.
Yeah.
I'm assuming right now nobody is sitting on it because nobody's told me, but it's an MMO community. You know how they are, so we'll find out. But if you are, I would greatly appreciate it if you'd let us know. Or if you have any ideas or hints, I'd greatly appreciate it if you'd let us know.
It is 8 after. Do you want to take one more question?
Yeah, I think that we should. Actually, this is one that somebody just asked about skills. So I do want to talk about that. That was on my list of things to discuss today. So another thing that I want to let you guys know that we heard you about was we put out a big update to how skill training would work for VIP versus not VIP. And there were a lot of people who didn't like that proposal. So I always take your when we ever put that stuff out, I always read through the threads. I think there were some excellent points made. The biggest one that I took away from that I thought, yeah, that really sucks, was that you have to wake up at 3:17 in the morning to actually adjust your skills, or you're going to lose some efficiency. Or what happens if one of my skill dings happens while I'm in the middle of a midterm? That really sucks. Like, I totally agree with you on that. So we will be putting in a grace period mechanic that gives you some amount of time. The grace period for VIP will be pretty short, or for non-VIP will be pretty short, because we do want you to log in. It doesn't have to be at 3:17 in the morning, but it does. We do want you to have to log in more as a convenience. To the VIP people, period will be much longer. It may be something like 30 days. So you'll get an update soon on exactly how that's going to work, but I did hear your concerns on that. I don't agree with all of them, but I agree with some of them, and I don't want it to be punishing to anybody. So we're going to deal with that as well. So expect an update on that too.
Yeah.
I think that's probably it for now. Is there anything else that we had on our list? I think that's a pretty good rundown. Let me check my little list, guys, real quick. So we talked about that. We talked about that. We talked about that. EK pieces. I had a question about the EK pieces being added to the bundles, because we put in a bunch of new cool pieces with, like, now it's a tower that has a hallway running through the middle of it with archer bump, little archer holes on it, and it's got, like, the keep has now an interior that you can go into. That stuff got migrated into the campaign world. It has not come up into the EKs, so we need to add some of those to existing bundles and also put up some new bundles to let you buy more of them if you want to. It's a thing. We haven't gotten to it. We'll get to it. So that's coming as well. Anything else that we need to cover right now? So we talked about that earlier.
Okay.
I think I covered that too.
Okay.
So, all right, guys. Well, I want to say thank you to everybody for coming and checking in with us, and for following the project as always. I know things from the outside in, sometimes it seems like we're crazy. We probably are, but there is a method to our madness. And I want to thank you all for being incredibly patient. This is my, this is my 4th MMO. They always take years to do. And if you're not intimately involved, it's like, God, what could take so long? And the answer is, it's like you're moving a mountain. And, it's not the boulders that kill you. It's moving all of the dirt one spoonful at a time. Yeah. And so eventually we will get there. And I hope, if nothing else, you guys have seen now that it's been a constant cadence of steady progress towards a goal. So that's it. Every day you come in and you push a little bit more. So thank you for being with us for this. This is the hard part of the project, quite frankly. It's just another damn thing where the major boulders are moved, but it seems like an endless mountain of pebbles. So we are getting there. We are knocking our way through it. Stick with us. And anyway, thanks for the questions and the feedback. We couldn't do it without you.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add?
No.
Do you want to do a call out to John O'Neill?
John O'Neill. No.
All right.
That's about all I can stomach.
Yeah, I got it. All right, guys. Thank you very much. If you have other questions and stuff like that, jump on the forums. Please keep giving us the feedback in the testing forum because it's incredibly valuable. I read them all. I go through them. I don't comment on them all because I don't have time, but I do go through them all and I make sure they're all in the system. And if I have specific questions, I will also often follow up with you over private message. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank
And
you. See you in the game.
I think that's it. See you in the game.